Welcome to Uninformed Summary, a podcast where four friends get together and talk about a person or a topic in history and how that person or topic affected history. Our story. That's what we call it. Copyright TM.
Yes, welcome. In the hot seat we have Matt.
Hi.
Nope.
Oh, my bad.
At Malswald. You can...
Sorry. Matt is next, but Scott's gonna be in the hot seat first. Sorry, Scott. Love you.
Oh, it's all good. So I'm in the hot seat, followed by Matt, followed by Molly, followed by Vinny. So
Yeah.
I've...
Well,
Oh, that's right. God damn it.
it doesn't really matter at this point because we're on episode 3 of Hamilton and we are all experts on Hamilton by now.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for the dramatic conclusion and hopefully he doesn't die in a duel is all that I'm hoping.
And I didn't do any research.
Yeah, that's what threw me off is me doing that editing for episode 10, but I have episode 11 already scheduled post tomorrow at 8 a.m. So if that tells anyone how far in the future we are. But yeah, so we're doing Hamilton. And so just, I guess, picking up from where we last left off was the Reynolds Pamphlet.
The most pornographic of all of the confessions.
It was pretty graphic.
I actually brushed up on a video today while we get into it about that, and they were saying it's like 90 pages.
Yeah. He went into some detail.
Yeah,
like,
it was actually insane.
Yeah. Especially for the time. Like
He's like, no way could I have been spending the government's money like you accuse me, because I was all up in it. And I was doing this with the back of her dress while I had my mouth around her toesies. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, whoa. And her husband walked in and started extorting me, you see. It wasn't my fault. It's like, whoa. I mean, he was way more eloquent.
Of course.
Yes. So essentially, the next thing we're going to talk about in terms of after the Reynolds Pamphlet, because at this point, Hamilton's career, for the most part, is effectively over. Once he decided to respond to that, his chances of ever becoming president were moot. And not long after that, I mean, he effectively resigned anyway. He actually may have resigned right before that happened, but regardless, as he was, by this point, he's no longer really in public eye, outside of the fact that he has a minute following of people that liked his policies and the things that he was hoping to accomplish. He's no longer having a direct say in the government. Or is he?
Secret cabal.
So we're going to go to the 1800 election. What essentially happens is that it comes down between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson.
DJ.
Now, one of the issues that comes to arise is that John Adams is from Hamilton's party, the Federalists, and they don't get along. And there's a few different reasons for that. One of which is that Hamilton tried to get one of the Pinckney brothers elected to vice president instead of Adams. But then he tries to do it again with another Pinckney brother in the election of 1800. It does not go great. And Adams finds out about it, and it pretty much ruins a lot. I may have mixed something up already. Because the 1796, when there's when Hamilton tries to get a Pinckney brother in, it's easy to mix that up with the election of 4 years later, where Hamilton once again wants a Pinckney brother in. So,
yeah,
what's with the Pinckneys?
Yeah,
they're
and I don't
not
know.
Adams. I
Right.
think that's what it is. They have the best
Maybe a
statistical
Pinckney,
chance.
but at least he's not an Adams.
Yep, can't let a Republican like TJ in there. Got to have a Federalist, and their pool. Like, okay, so I'll jump in. From what I was getting into my amateurish research, the Federalist Party's pretty fractured anyway. Like they have like a few people that could really stand up to being electable against TJ and them, right? But not that many. And all the infighting weakens the structure of it, and that's bad. Everybody doesn't like that.
Correct. And to be honest with you, I mean, Thomas Jefferson, it was seemingly going to be Thomas Jefferson from kind of the get-go, because Adams wasn't very well liked. Partly because Adams was exactly like himself, which was an unlikable thing. But also because Adams really spent much time like at his job. He spent most of the time at his house, and like people would have to come by his house to tell him like things, that is not located in the capital. So things weren't going great. And when John Adams found out that Hamilton had been basically feeding policies to people that John Adams had in his close inner cabinet, that's when he immediately started to hate everything about Hamilton. On top of the fact that, once again, Hamilton's trying to purposefully not get him elected. So what ends up happening to Hamilton is at one point, the United States starts to get involved in a semi-threatening heightening of the arms, if you will, situation against France. And it became like a massive problem of if we have to fight a war against France. Someone pointed out, I was like, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention. We don't have an army. And the last time we had one, they got real mad because we didn't want to pay them at first. So essentially, they decide that they have to build an army to deal with this France threat, if only to be a deterrent. So John Adams sends a letter to Washington and goes, hey, I could really use you as the leader of our army that we're needing to create. Or are you in? At the same time, Hamilton is also sending letters to Washington saying, listen, you're going to need, you're needed. We need you to lead the army. You know that. And Washington sends a letter back. He's like, well, if I were going to lead the army, I would need some really good, like, right-hand people.
Getting the gang back together.
Yes. Yeah. So he's like, Hamilton responds to that with, well, I mean, I would, but only if you're leading it.
Oh my God! This will they won't they just
get a room.
But that was kind of that says a lot about the relationship, because the Jeffersonians is a word that I've recently learned, is that the Jeffersonians were convinced that Hamilton had dirt on Washington. That's why Washington defended him over everything. And in reality, they didn't. They just respected each other.
That'd be like Hamilton's like, did you guys know? Like, I'm not going to tell anybody, but he's got some wood ass teeth.
Don't tell nobody.
We're not talking oak. Those are pine teeth.
Sidebar. I think he tried hot take. I think he tried slave teeth for a while there. You can look that up at your own discretion, but I believe that was a practice. We'll move on.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe a short story.
Yeah. Well,
are you trying to cancel George Washington?
Oh man, they had their bigger problems, right?
Right. Well, one of those bigger problems was that they're afraid that we're about to all start speaking French. So with that in mind, Washington is planning on accepting, but he hasn't sent anything back to Adams because he wants to hear back from Hamilton if Hamilton will join. Because by this point, once again, Hamilton says he's retired. Hamilton's like, well, once again, if you're in there, I mean, you can give me some sort of command. It'll be fine. It's not like that would be the number one thing that could help revive my career for a minute, but this is
I
all
reluctantly accept.
So
prestigious honor.
So John Adams ended up actually announcing that George Washington was going to be the leader of the army before George Washington even accepted that. So kind of backed him into a corner. And Hamilton ended up sending him a letter. It's like, well, how nice of John Adams to have accepted your, nomination without your consent. Isn't that nice? But essentially what ends up happening is George Washington makes Hamilton second in command of the entire United States military.
Back in action.
Yeah. Problem being is John Adams was like, well, wait. No. And so, I mean, George Washington ended up electing 3 different people to be generals, but it was Alexander Hamilton who was the top person that was beside Washington. One of the generals actually resigned because he just would not do it. And so, yes, that became a bit of a situation. But once again, it's not like Hamilton's leading the army. George Washington's leading it. And so, I mean, all we have to do is avoid George Washington dying and everything's good. So George Washington died. And so then that immediately went. So I guess Hamilton's in charge of the military. And then John Adams was like, well, no, actually, we're going to not have one anymore because we won. It's over. It's done
with the military. Good job. Good job.
Now,
Go
obviously,
home, everybody.
By the time they got done bickering over who should be in charge.
Right. And this entire situation lasted over the course of 2 years. So now fast forwarding from there, John Adams is running again, and it clearly becomes that it's going to be John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. Or is it? So what ends up happening is...
Oh, I can't decide. Oh my God, this event is killing me.
So, yeah, Hamilton's attempts to get Charles Coatworth Pinckney higher up on the totem pole, as in top of the country, did not go great. And so now it became between Adams and Jefferson, except now one of the things that ends up happening in this election is, well, a couple things. One, Hamilton decided to send out a letter encouraging all of the Federalists to vote for, I mean, his party's is the Federalists, so the Federalist candidate's John Adams, so obviously Thomas Jefferson, which was a huge surprise because Thomas Jefferson's, well, I'll put it this way, Hamilton's biggest adversary was Thomas Jefferson. Even though, you know, everyone knows a little bit about what happened with Burr, it's Thomas Jefferson. That's the antagonist, and the Hamilton is the protagonist story. So for Hamilton to be saying, actually, I think Jefferson, who disagrees with everything that I've ever said ever, would be a better choice. Yeah, so that didn't go over great with Adams either. And so Jefferson theoretically would be coming out ahead in that case. But Hamilton did not plan for that letter to be read by anyone else. It was picked up and posted in a newspaper, and then Hamilton had to come out and say, yeah, that was me. Because, yeah, Hamilton would do that a lot, where he would write under a fake name. In this particular case, it was a pamphlet meant to be read, not necessarily from him, but at least encouraging people to vote for Jefferson. Go ahead, Vinny.
Yeah, they would just pass these things out to Federalists, known Federalists, and people who associated and have like pseudonyms, but also Hamilton's newspaper is getting off the ground, right? 1800, it's the New York Evening Post, which is like a political rag, right? Like he's making his own paper at this time, handing it out. And it's mostly built for political, you know, mudslinging between him and Adams. And I think the notion that old Hammy had was like, I'm going to tell everybody to vote for Jefferson, because in my mind, and of course I'm right, because I'm Alexander Hamilton, you vote for Jefferson because instead of Adams, because Jefferson has the wrong ideals, but at least he fucking has ideals, because my man Adams over here is a total piece of shit, worthless, you know. And he really was, like, he was really scathing to Adams. Well, Adams is also like one of the most abusive people to run the country out of two.
Out of
and
two,
doing a
yes,
bad job
for sure.
compared to like Washington set a great example of respect and elevating the office to a point that Hamilton agreed with on a sort of moralistic level. And then Adams comes in and, like you said, stays at home, strike one, like acts like a
Mhm.
douchebag at the office. Adams would famously take his wig off when he got angry, throw it on the ground, and fucking stomp on it. He's like, because he's mad that the policy advisors are not like digging his suggestions, which
Mhm.
as a Federalist means he wants all the power. So anyway, it's just it's kind of like we all know Adams is a dick. Hamilton was kind of saying it and saying he shouldn't steer the ship.
Mhm.
It's a lonely
Yeah.
road to hoe. That's my point.
And Hamilton was also really big on not talking about where his parents and where he came from and that kind of thing, because he's like, well, I'm basically of the mindset that he is American and that's what matters. And Adams, it almost seems like Adams found out about the term Creole bastard and then would not stop saying it. I mean, like, I found like 13 different iterations where he referred to Hamilton as a Creole bastard.
Yep,
Which back
absolutely.
then that was some fighting words right there. So it should be now Thomas Jefferson's president, but that's not the case because back then there was the possibility of a tie. And where Hamilton got in a bit of trouble because he was trying to get one of the Pinckney brothers elected over Adams and acting like he was all cool with Adams. So back when Hamilton was trying to get one of the Pinckney brothers elected, it was Aaron Burr, that pointed out, he was like, hey, don't know if you guys noticed this, but I think Hamilton's trying to get Pinckney brothers elected. And that was correct. So Burr was the one that kind of threw him under the bus.
Can I ask who the Pinckney brothers are?
Well,
You
there
keep
was
saying Pinckney brothers, and despite having extensive education history, I have no idea who they are.
Well, there was Charles Coatworth Pinckney, and then
Okay.
his brother was, and of course,
I mean, you don't gotta go deep, but like just in general.
Well, they're basically just Federalists that followed pretty much everything that Hamilton would say. For the most
Gotcha.
part, there was a situation of one of the Pinckney brothers not like doing kind of the opposite, but in
They were
terms
like
of like
Hamilton Federalists.
yes,
Gotcha.
yes,
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
yeah, and he liked both of them a lot. And of course, I'm having trouble remembering his brother's name. And the worst part is, I'm about 99.5% sure that his brother has a much easier name to remember. But Charles Coatworth Pinckney sounds like the name of like a British lord. So
It does. So was
It
Pinckney
does.
the tie? It was like Pinckney, Jefferson.
no, so the tie was actually between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. But Aaron Burr being the first one to point out that Hamilton was trying to get one of the Pinckney brothers elected subversively, it turned out to be Hamilton then kind of going, hey, I can't help but notice Burr is actively campaigning, which no one's done before. And I think he's not going for the vice presidency because the general consensus is that the parties were like, yes, John Adams is our candidate, and then we have our vice presidential candidate. And then in the Democrats or Democratic Republicans, it's Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr is going to be the vice president. And so everyone got to cast 2 votes, but their votes weren't for just president and vice president. They weren't 2 separate votes. They were 1 vote. So whoever gets the most votes becomes president, second most votes become vice president. Thus how we got you can have people from different parties being different vice presidents of the party that's in the office. So that's thus how Thomas Jefferson was vice president to John Adams. So in this particular case, Burr is actively trying to enable a tie to give himself more time for people to kind of go, well, I mean, if there's a tie, maybe we'll do this. So Hamilton points it out, and Burr is like, no, I am not running for president. I'm not planning on taking the nomination. So even if I win, it's like, even if I do really well, that's not my plan. So I have no vice president's good enough for me. You know what I mean?
Oh boy, geez, they're also darn polite about what the power they want to assume forever.
Yeah, I've seen House of Cards too.
Yeah, Burr, who would later run. Well, I'm not going to spoil that, but yeah, what a self-interested prick.
Right, and then Hamilton's like, no, don't believe him. He's clearly trying to run for president. And so what ends up happening is that a little time later, when it looks like there might be a tie, Burr is like, well, I mean, I'm kind of at the behest of whatever the electorate is saying. So, I mean, if there's a tie and they elect me, I'm not going to say no. That would be ridiculous. You know, that just seems wrong. Be taking away the voice from the people. So, yeah, there ends up being a tie. And at this point, Hamilton can now decide to write some letters, and maybe, you know, Thomas Jefferson's his biggest rival, like we said before. So him going against John Adams, but now he has an actual candidate that he could possibly go for.
So did they only tie once? Because
they tied a lot.
Yeah, they tied
they
a
just
lot.
Kept voting and voting and voting. I don't remember. I think it was like 36 or something.
36.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
36 times they voted, and they tied. So that's when Hamilton finally is like, all right, yeah, we need to vote for Jefferson. And it's really very simple why we need to. Jefferson, I've disagreed with Jefferson on every single thing that's ever been brought to the floor. I think that his form of running the government is just a catastrophe waiting to happen. But Jefferson has views, Burr has none. Burr does not live by any set of principles except for those that benefit Aaron Burr. So obviously Aaron Burr heard this and was like, you know what? You've taken the presidency from me. Because of course Jefferson ends up getting the vote after that. We're going to duel. Or did he? He didn't. I'm just going to spoil it. He didn't. He didn't threaten him to a duel for that. Okay. So I have a lot to get through, so I'm going to kind of speed read this real quick. So one of the things that ends up happening, and I don't remember exactly where in this process it starts, but this is just another rift between Hamilton and Burr, is that Hamilton had a monopoly on the banks that were in New York. That was set up through legislation. Everything Hamilton got passed, he could sell it under one premise and then sell it under, then actually implement it under another. That came up a lot when it would come to the powers that a president has, is that when Hamilton's arguing for like as vague possibilities of what the president's power is, and then turning around and going, well, it's implied powers from the Constitution. It doesn't exactly say that you can't do that. And so that's something that Hamilton would do. And one of those things that he did was he ensured that there would be no banks that were made outside of the Bank of New York or the United States Bank for loaning purposes or any sort of banks. So essentially what ends up happening is Burr comes to Hamilton's like, hey, so I want to start this water company. It's going to be called the Manhattan Company. We're going to supply water. It's going to be great. It's going to be huge. Everything's going to be awesome. And so Hamilton's like, yeah, man, I'll help you out. That sounds great. And Hamilton fought really hard to get this water company for Burr through, which can only surmise now by saying this and remembering it. This definitely happened before Hamilton decided not to get him into the presidency. So, so he's like, and he was one of Burr's biggest supporters on getting this water company through. And then once it passed is when Hamilton made the grave mistake of realizing that he did not read the fine print of what Burr was doing. Burr had set up a clause inside the water company that was any excess surplus money that they had could be used for loans.
Backdoor bank.
Yes. And essentially the way that it worked out is I think they raised around $200 million or $202 million when they initially opened. And they used 100,000 of that for the water company and 1.9 million for the bank.
Okay, do some quick calc right here. The 1.9 million that time money. Yep, that's like 15.
I don't even think he
Bitcoins.
wanted to start a water company.
Correct.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
And
What a
that
joke.
definitely would have influenced him not wanting Burr to be president later after realizing this juxtaposition of who he thought he was and who he ends up actually being.
Can I jump in again? I think I tried to attribute that process of no values or some values to Jefferson Adams, but I guess it was a Jefferson Burr, because it sounds like Aaron Burr is way more of a jerk.
Well, Burr was, here's how I would put it, is John Adams was an old farm boy, and Burr is a city slicker salesman. You know, John Adams would make mistakes very publicly because he lacked the capability of holding it together. Whereas Burr could hold it together, but he was very sneaky and sly. And that would come up a lot. One of the things that he would say all the time was in stark contrast to Hamilton, who would write everything down. Burr would say, I don't want anything that I say to be written down unless like it absolutely has to be, because if it's written down, it can be, you know, copied. If I just say it, well, you need proof essentially. So, and I'm paraphrasing, that wasn't exactly what he said, but you get the idea. So we're going to fast forward to a year after the election. You know, Jefferson is now president. And there is a guy named George Eaker that is believe Democratic Republican. Regardless, he ends up giving like a little bit of a speech where he basically says that that Hamilton would not have been opposed to overthrowing Thomas Jefferson as president. And a few other hostilities, making, you know, some comments about who Hamilton is. And Hamilton had a son, his oldest son, Philip Hamilton. And essentially, Philip was actually following kind of in his father's footsteps in terms of like his intelligence. A lot of people were really well known, would comment on the fact that he was super intelligent like his father. And so when his son heard George Eaker saying these things in the speech, he got, or at least heard that he said them, he got pissed off about it. So one day they go to see a play and he sees George Eaker at the play. Amen. And he makes a comment to him and things start to progress. It's Philip was there with a friend of his. And what essentially happens is one of the guys, George Eaker ends up calling them damned rascals.
Which shit.
Yeah, that's back then. That's like
shots fired.
Literally. And so,
oh no,
Philip and his friend both challenge Eaker to a duel. And Eaker's like, yeah, let's fucking go. And his buddy duels with them. No one gets injured. It all works out. But before Philip has his duel, before they even go out to the dueling field, because this happened one after another, he went to his dad. He was like, excuse me, Dad Hamilton Alexander. I'm going to be partaking in a duel for your honor. What should I do? And Hamilton told him, you know, son, the only honorable thing to really do here is to not shoot. It's also, and it's actually kind of weird because back then it was dishonorable to not shoot at all. So you have to shoot, but you have to make it abundantly clear that you're not going to shoot at him. And so essentially, I believe his son didn't actually end up firing his shot at all at first. And then they tried to work out a resolution. It did not come to a resolution. They went for the second round of the duel where Philip was shot and killed.
Yep.
So Hamilton is there, and now, you know, it's like Hamilton's the one who told him to throw away his shot and not to shoot. And of course he ends up dying, this is not at all foreshadowing. So So he has
Everybody's
this conversation with them, and obviously he dies after as a result. But um, yeah, it really fucked with Hamilton for a long time, and he kind of like was staying out of it. And as a result, Hamilton was actually becoming kind of against dueling. Despite the fact that he would eventually duel, he was becoming an outspoken supporter of ending the practice of dueling.
Oh, I
So,
wonder why.
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
I'm gonna
I think because his son died.
Quick little bit. Yeah, probably
Thank you,
that.
Matt.
Matt got there. Thanks, Matt. Hey, another thing on dueling that I encountered, if you guys are up for a share, they would do it in the backyard of New York. So they were like living in New York. But dueling was like heavily prosecuted. But if they went to New Jersey, no one would prosecute you for it. So it was a fairly common practice for people to go to New Jersey, have a quick duel, or maybe not, or work it out. But either way, they would all show up there, and they would have like,
Mhm.
yeah, they'd have like doctors on standby, but plausibly, deniably far away, so that they could maybe, oops, I happened upon this group of duelists on my morning walk, my doctor walk. Got to stay fit. So, I helped them. I'm not a criminal. They weren't dueling. Because dueling was against the law, but it was hardly ever prosecuted by the law as a matter of honor, or what was called an affair of honor, right? So that was kind of like the lockup that they were in, was this affair of honor. And if those affairs went too far, like Phillips, where Eckert grabs him by the lapels, that's like the offense. You touched me. You know what I mean? Like, too far, dude. I'm gonna shoot at you now. And I can kind of see why Hamilton's dad was like, maybe not anymore.
That's like the
Yeah.
weird thing about dueling, right? Is that it's like they had evolved this whole system to make sure that most of these things didn't end up in anybody dying. But like at the end of the day, it was still some potentially pissed off dudes pointing guns at each other. So sometimes people did die, even though like they were trying to set it up so that people didn't die.
Correct. And you would think that by like establishing a form of government and laws and all that stuff, this stuff would go away. But they no, it continued to happen. And so from all of this, Hamilton has finally kind of actually retired from public eye. I mean, he's still having like dinners. He's moved back to doing his law practice, and he's no longer trying to get himself involved in the government, despite the fact that people in the government are like still trying to get him to do and be in positions that he isn't even necessarily interested in. This may not be a surprise to you, but like, so Burr becomes the vice president of the United States. And when the 1804 election's coming up, there doesn't appear to be any particular fear that Jefferson's going to lose the next election.
Because he's awesome.
Yeah, and handsome. Look back.
I'm leaving the silence in. So
It's fine. That smile speaks for itself.
So it becomes very clear to Burr that he is going to be ousted as vice president. So Jefferson starts floating the idea of maybe getting in George Clinton, the governor of New York, to become the new vice president after the next election. And so Burr is kind of like, well, I'm not going to be here, but you know what I could do that would still keep my career afloat would be to become the governor of New York. Maybe just switch spots with Clinton. And for the most part, he wasn't actually doing a terrible job at getting that spot. And I mean, he had taken one of the Senate seats from Hamilton's brother-in-law or father-in-law as well. So him winning elections in New York is typically not a hard thing for him. So Hamilton did have a problem with this because he was super afraid that Burr would try to have New York, and at least some places near New York, secede from the new United States.
Oh,
So he starts talking a little shit, not typically like publicly. And believe it or not, like there were tons of articles and stuff posted up that was very anti-Burr for governor of New York. And Burr was convinced that it's Hamilton writing under a pseudonym. It
He does
wasn't,
have a track record of doing that.
but he
Right.
has that track record. And so really it was more Hamilton's like at a dinner and he's talking to these two guys and um I believe one of them was Charles Cooper. And he's saying that he's just talking shit about Burr. Vague things, mostly just saying he's going to secede. And so at one point, I believe it was Charles Cooper writes a letter, or at least like a pamphlet kind of thing in the newspaper, saying that, you know, Burr is all of these things. And I'm not going to list a lot of them because it is not socially acceptable to say some of those things. But
Nice.
at the time, it was very negative.
He was a
Um,
cretin and a down rascal.
yes.
Oh yeah, they did rascals.
But the article accused Burr of things like you know, explicitly looking out for married women, very young girls,
Wait a second, not
deflowering.
philandering.
Yeah. And he wasn't very discreet about it. And it's actually really weird because I don't understand what Burr's relationship was with his daughter, who has the same name as uh, Burr's ex-wife who had died. Well, I guess that would be the mother of her, but it was Theodosia. But he like would send her
Trinity.
letters telling her of his sexual exploits, and then would say stuff like yeah, we had you know, I've been messing around with this one girl and she's, you know, very sensible and she's understanding and very smart and a bit flat chested though, if you know what I mean by that. And these are the things that Burr was sending to his daughter. So
weird.
so that's going to come in just a second because Charles Cooper writes out this thing going, you know, I believe it was Charles Cooper wrote out this thing saying that, you know, these are all the things that are wrong with him. And, you know, and Hamilton even had some negative stuff to say about him at a dinner party. And he had said all this stuff. And a member of, I think it was Hamilton's brother-in-law wrote back saying, well, Hamilton would not have said that. That's not something Hamilton would say. And Cooper then published a new letter saying that Hamilton had expressed an even more despicable opinion of Aaron Burr.
Yeah, you want to know what my brother would have said? Here, I'll tell you some shit. Well, how about this? If what you are articulating, I don't think you're implying any, like you're a detective who knows about Aaron Burr's weird bedroom
definitely not.
stuff. But let's say Hamilton had the same suspicions that arise when you hear that weird stuff. He might be like, dude, I'm never going to let this guy get elected. Maybe he has like a weird complex about not airing Burr's dirtiest laundry. But what if that was, I don't know, you just sparked a mystery in me.
Well, and that's where this is going to kind of come up because we don't know for sure that Hamilton said any of these things. But you also have someone that had been whispering to Burr going, you know, I can't believe that you're going to let, like, people in the press would go, you know, clearly Burr would disavow the things that Hamilton said about him when he was running in, you know, the 1800 election. And he would also disavow all these things and like actually stand up to Hamilton if all these things were not true. But you're not doing it, Burr. So what's going on? All of this was inciting what would eventually become this duel. And so essentially, Burr gets fed up and he finally sends Hamilton like a letter basically saying, okay, I demand an apology for the things that you said about me that were basically false. Burr sends him the letter saying basically to apologize for what he said. and to disavow them and to admit that, he was wrong. And Hamilton responds back with, well, unless you have a specific instance of something that I have said, I don't know what you want me to apologize for. I don't know what you're talking about. And so Burr basically sends back, and these are like the correspondence that's happening between them, but he basically sends back, you know what you said, just admit to it and apologize and we can move on. And Hamilton's like, if I have to go through and think of every bad thing I've ever said about you, like, I'm not apologizing for that. So if you have an issue, you're going to have to be more specific about what I said. Now, someone had printed in the press around this time that insinuating that Burr may be having an incestuous relationship with his daughter.
Cringy.
Correct. And the press was often lying about a bunch of stuff. That's part of why Hamilton had such a problem with the press. That's part of why the Sedition Act was posted in the first place.
A good thing they cleared all that up.
Right, and now everything is good. But essentially, that was big fighting words.
Did something happen?
Burr already has in his head that some of these things that are being put inside the newsletters are Hamilton, and then now you have Cooper going, well, Hamilton said there's an even more despicable opinion that we haven't even posted. And so Burr kind of thinks, or at least there is reason to believe that Burr could possibly think that might be part of what is happening, is that that's what Hamilton's saying. And so Hamilton's like, listen, I don't even have any idea what you're talking about. And Burr's like, well, you're going to fucking apologize for what you said. And he's like, I don't know what you're saying at all.
You know how the game Telephone works?
Yeah.
It just gets worse and worse the more people it goes through.
This is like slow motion telephone too, because like all this, like these guys are writing letters. They have like a day to think about it every time they post. Like they're just getting mad about it.
Like a game of diplomacy where in 2 turns your best friend becomes your enemy.
He's just like sitting there reading it at dinner, and he's like stewing. He's like, as soon as I'm done with this fucking soup, I am writing a letter back, and it's gonna be fire.
You do not want this smoke. Period. Oop.
You doth not want these hands.
That was. Yeah. So Hamilton's like I said, you're gonna have to be more specific. I don't know what you're talking about. And essentially Burr is like, okay, I want you to apologize for anything that you've ever said about my character. Personal, professionally, public and private, ever. I want you to
it's a blanket apology.
Yeah. And that's how Hamilton viewed it. It's like, I'm not giving you a blanket apology that you can then use as like an argument as to me like endorsing you for governor later.
Right.
He's like, so no, I'm not doing that. And so, and at one point, Hamilton sent him a letter. He goes, I'm sure if you think about this, your point of view would become aligned with mine. But if not, then I'm willing to accept whatever consequences you offer.
Oof, gauntlet.
Just basically like, listen, if you're going to challenge me to a duel, I'm going to accept it, just so you know. But I also think you're way wrong. And so he responds back with essentially, yeah, let's have a duel. And I think he suggested it for not too far out. And Hamilton was like, let's push it back like 3 weeks because I've got a bunch of like clients I have to, take care of right now. It's a whole thing. So, so everyone, Hamilton kind of kept that really close to the chest. He didn't say, anyway, he kind of kept that really close to his chest because...
Is that a dueling shot in the chest?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Okay. So edgy. So, so he didn't really tell much of it, like anybody. He didn't tell his wife. He didn't tell his kids. But what he did do is he indicated to the people close to him in his life that he worked with essentially that he was going to throw away his shot and hope that Burr would come to his senses. And people were talking to him. It's like, listen, so we've been talking to Burr, and he's gonna kill you, bro. And Hamilton's like, well, I'm gonna throw away my shot. And an actual statement that was said to him in response was, well, then you are leading yourself like a lamb to the slaughter. But
Ooh.
Hamilton was gauging on the fact, or like hedging his bet on the fact that Burr had nothing to gain by killing Hamilton. Like, having the duel, maybe he has something to gain, but like actually following through and killing Hamilton, he had everything to lose. He has no potential future after that. So he's like, I don't think he'll kill me, but if he does, he went and like he made up a will and he got all this stuff together, but he basically told the people that knew about the duel happening that he's like, yeah, I'm not going to shoot him. He even wrote a letter saying, you know, if I die, or what, essentially that he was planning on throwing away his first shot, but he hadn't decided on whether or not he would throw away his second shot if it came to a second shot. He was still debating it. So they go out. They go to New Jersey, where once again, like you were saying, dueling wasn't
it's
as taboo.
totally cool out there. Weehawken.
Right. And yeah, and Hamilton once again had never been in a duel. I don't remember if Aaron Burr had, but Aaron Burr was well known for being a really good shot.
Yeah.
So Hamilton has this debate on, do I not raise my gun? Well, that's dishonorable. So I have to raise my gun, but that means I need to raise my gun before he shoots so he can see that I'm not going to shoot at him and that I'm just going to shoot like above him. But there were also people that were thinking that that Hamilton was actually going there to shoot to kill, which, as I've stated already now, is not the case. But even Burr had reason to believe it because Burr watched as Hamilton at one point, who had the option of where to stand, decided to stand with his eyes towards the sun. And he also said that with the sun in his eyes, that he would be able to see better if he had glasses on. So he wouldn't put on glasses. So Burr then thinks to himself, well, if he's only putting on glasses because he wants to be able to see. Whereas other historians have said that no, he was putting on his glasses so he could see where not to shoot. I don't know where I fall on that. I would think
call,
that,
isn't it?
yeah, if there's a blur in front of you, but like, there's clearly a person there, and you take steps away from each other, I feel like you could just shoot like over here and you're good. But I wasn't there.
And guns only went like 20 feet back then, so.
Yeah, it's not like you gotta like aim for a button. Like you can just aim center mass, even if it's just a blob, right?
Yeah.
You would think.
They also had a pretty regularized practice of shooting over the head of another duelist.
Right.
So like an opponent would they'd be about to take a shot, and then a second would be like, you don't have, they'd be like you said, Matt, earlier, they'd talk it down, walk it back, even to the point where you're about to shoot each other.
And believe it or not, that's what Hamilton is hoping for. He's like, I don't want to shoot Burr. I have no intentions of shooting Burr. So I'm hoping that by throwing away the shot, he'll see that, he'll come to his senses, and we'll all be good. And so they end up having their duel, and there's so many differing accounts, especially when it comes to witnesses, but Hamilton's gun went off. But most historians believe that his gun went off because of an involuntary like spasm from when you're shot. It was the gun ended up going over 12 feet over, or the bullet ended up going 12 feet over Burr's head. So decently not headed directly towards him.
Right.
Yeah, for a former soldier, that's a pretty deliberate miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Burr's second claimed that Hamilton's shot went off first. But regardless, if Hamilton's shot went off first, then that means that he clearly intentionally threw away the shot, and that Burr then turned around and shot him. I believe it was actually the hip, but
yeah, I think a bullet went through the hip, then lodged in the spine of Good old Hamilton.
Those bullets were big back then.
Oh,
They didn't
big
have
and clumsy bullets.
Yeah, they did not have high muzzle velocity compared to what we got now, but they were very large.
Oh my god, can you imagine being like hit by that in front of all your friends and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to act cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Not to take away from it. I know he died and stuff, but come on. I'm gonna put a little Vinny spice right here and just say we're all sitting here kind of glooming on how rich politicians were honorably, I'm doing air quotes, breaking the law and gonna get away with it. Committing murder. Just saying.
Right.
No one gets charged here. Spoiler.
Well, actually.
Or did they?
Or did they?
I like this theme.
So
they did.
Listen, I have no Hamilton letters to read from in that
sad.
Lord accent. So this is what we got. I'm filling it in with or did they? So as soon as Hamilton got shot, now Burr's biographer, the Ron Chernow, Ron Chernow basically says that he believes that Hamilton took his shot, deliberately missed, and then Burr shot him. Is the consensus. But either way, Hamilton falls to the ground and has to be carried away from the field and put onto a boat immediately. And they actually took like the secrecy of these kinds of things like very seriously. So it didn't take. I mean, it didn't get out for like 10 minutes. The duel occurred. But no, like at one point, like they kept the pistols in a box that certain people couldn't see, so they would have deniability, so they could go, I didn't even know they were pistols. I thought we were out here to have a nice, adversarial picnic. And the next thing you know is someone started blasting. So
yeah, they even hit the doctor in a boat. Like that's what I was alluding to earlier. The doctor was stationed away from the duel, which probably I don't think that hammy was going to get up after the bullets lodged in your spine, but like a less lethal shot could have had better odds of medical success anyway if the doctor was there, not like a half-mile's hike away.
Right.
I just don't get it. I know they did the musical and stuff. And Lin-Manuel Miranda and everything. But like again, it's politicians like law breaking, murdering to like run the country. It's just they should have talked it out. Just gonna say that. Put that out there.
Yeah.
Well,
Hamilton did 10 times before this. He talked his way out of it because he was in like 11 total affairs of honor, like in his life. But this time,
he always talked his way out of it.
I'm gonna just say this: we've been building a narrative. Aaron Burr's an asshole. He totally did it. I bet it was dirty because Aaron Burr did it. That's all I'm saying.
I find it particularly annoying and disappointing because, like, supposedly these were like the founding fathers of our country, right? And like it was founded on like Enlightenment values and like rejecting of old traditions of the aristocracy and stuff like that. But like, you motherfuckers are out there doing aristocrat shit.
Super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, between the billionaire or the millionaire waterfront water company, which is the front for the loaning company, and then like Alexander Hamilton accusing people of being like kind of shitty when really he had a newspaper that was kind of shitty on behalf of political interests he wanted to support for federalism's benefit. It's all a little two-sided, I guess, but
and to
I'll
be honest with you, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just this, because like I do want to put love in Alexander Hamilton's court. When we get the portrayals of him and by other people, it seems like no matter what people say, like they end up on, well, I mean, he's got really good ideas about it and he's pretty much right. It's just, it's kind of hard to listen to somebody cut to the core of you the way Alexander Hamilton did. And I think that might have been it. Burr was just looking down the barrel of his pistol and he's like, dude, I can make all this go away. He has fucked up 2 of my elections, president or vice president, governor. He's going to tell everyone I kiss my daughter in weird places. I'm going to just do this now. Bam.
Yeah, that's
Is
what I'm
it?
saying. That's what I'm saying is like so
That's
stupid about duels, right? It's like because
for
that can
sure.
happen. It's like you have dudes pointing at each other. All it takes is one dude for a second to be like, nah, fuck it, I want to kill him.
That's
And
what it sounds like to me here.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so Hamilton is, and part of what you're saying will I'm about to cover as well in terms of like using and gaming the system and that kind of thing, because yeah, we'll get to it. Essentially, what ends up happening is they get Hamilton back to the thing, and he doesn't even realize that he shot the gun
Oh
because
yeah,
as he's on the boat, he says, "Be careful with the gun; it's still loaded."
oh my god.
Um, he's focused on that. He does tell he's like he dies on the boat and then comes back. He officially dies 34 hours later, but when he gets back, they have to break the news to his wife because his wife didn't even know he was dueling that day.
Worse.
They
Let's
didn't
see.
tell anyone. And Aaron Burr treated it really weird because Aaron Burr wanted to go talk to Hamilton after he shot him, and they were like, "No, we got to get the fuck out of here. The fucking cops are coming, bro." So they all hopped in their getaway boats, and so Burr didn't
Okay.
get a chance to talk to Hamilton at all. But they got back to the house where Hamilton would eventually die. They get him upstairs, and he's telling them that basically like his wife is going, you know, like, tell my wife, but don't like tell her everything. Don't tell her I'm dying. He's like, let her know what happened, and then like break the news to her slowly.
Okay.
Because I do believe that Hamilton's exact words were the first words he said after he was shot was, "I am a dead man."
Yikes.
So he knew he was going to die. Like just from where he
Oh,
was hit, he's like, "Yep, this is it." So he died 34 hours later after he like fought with a clergyman friend that would not give him would not give him a communion because they cannot do communion under certain circumstances. This was one of them. Also because like the church itself was against the aspect of dueling, so he says I cannot do it. He did eventually find someone that did do communion with him. And then they brought in his kids, and he said, you know, bye to all of them, and was very adamant. He kept saying, he goes, just let Burr know I don't blame him, but also let him know that I had no intentions of shooting him. I didn't want to kill anyone.
dude,
And
my heart's breaking right now.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
rough.
and he died. And so it's interesting because for Burr, it was a bit of a different experience after he got back to where, you know, across the river. Essentially, it came out pretty quickly that he's been mortally wounded, and I remember that after he shot Hamilton, he then went to breakfast with like a friend of his, and then his friend is saying that like 2 hours after that, he's like walking down the street, and this guy walks up to him and he's like, "Did you hear the news? Aaron Burr shot and mortally wounded Hamilton this morning." And the guy's like, "That's not possible. I was just eating breakfast with him like 2 hours ago." And he goes,
Hmm.
"It says it on the bulletin." You know, it came out very quickly. And Burr was a real dick about it after Hamilton died.
I'm not surprised.
He, you know, anytime something would be said, he would like make a joke. He never apologized for it. And he was charged with murder in New Jersey as well as New York. I believe he was I know he was charged in New Jersey. I'm not entirely certain if he was charged in New York. So what
Both, I
he ends up,
believe.
yeah, I know that for sure that he ends up, he fled the country and went down to like some of the like neighboring islands and was down there for a little bit. And everyone's like, well, I guess we don't have a vice president now. That shit's crazy. And
Vice
so
presidents don't shoot people.
and so he comes in one day. They're all sitting there at the Capitol doing their jobs, working, and in comes Burr, and he just sits down, acting like nothing happened.
Ugh.
This is months later. This is after New Jersey dropped them charging him for murder because Hamilton died in New York and
I
didn't
see.
die in New Jersey.
That's
So yeah,
I'm
interesting.
gonna have an
so
aneurysm. That's so ridiculous. The statute of limitations on murder is months.
Right. Now just a few quick facts that is really interesting. When Hamilton died, one of the and it may have even been a little bit before, one of the things that happened to Hamilton was he tried to leave as much money as he could for his wife, but everyone kind of assumed that Hamilton was doing all of these policies and all these things to benefit him, that he had to have some stash of money of some sort, that he was hiding and, cooking the books and that kind of thing. In reality, he was definitely more well off than the average person, but he was effectively kind of destitute in terms of like the amount of money that people would think that he had. His wife could not afford to keep the house that they had, built not that many years before. To the point where she had to, the only way that she was able to keep the house was as people got together, paid off the house, and then sold it to her back for like half price so that she could afford it. At one point, Thomas Jefferson had put someone in charge of going through all of the records to see if they could find where Hamilton had been like stealing money, because that was something that was constantly going on. Is Jefferson accusing Hamilton of like stealing or embezzling money or finding ways to game the system? And the guy came back and he said, "No, there's nothing here. Unfortunately, there's nothing here." But that never stopped Jefferson from continually going and saying all of these things about what Hamilton had done. And that caused a big rift for Hamilton's wife, Eliza. Eliza was so disheartened by things that came out in papers after Hamilton died that still accused him of things that he can now no longer defend or, defend himself on. And so she made it like her life's goal to make a biography about him to prove that he was actually a good guy, and that he was a Christian man and all these things. And she like interviewed soldiers that he like was on the battlefield with.
Dang, God.
And yeah, and so if you remember in episode 1 where I would talk about like the letters that he had between him and John Lawrence, and those worrisome letters where at the top of it it would say, "I must not publish the whole of this." It's actually believed that was Hamilton's son who was creating the biography that was marking that out at the behest of Eliza. Eliza and Hamilton at one point during their marriage actually adopted a little girl and kept her for 2 years until she found a new home. And they were very big on trying to make certain that orphans had a home. And we believe that that's mostly because of how Hamilton kind of jumped from house to house as his dad left and his mom died, and then he had no parents, and now he's growing up and becoming the trading, in charge of the trading charter and all of that. So his wife ends up helping to open the first orphanage of New York.
Dang.
Yeah, and his wife always stood by his side and always, she treated him kind of as a demigod in terms of how she would talk about him. And so the way I plan on ending this episode is telling a quick little story about Eliza Hamilton after Hamilton died, because Eliza lived to be so old that
How old was she?
She died in her 90s, I think.
Okay, wow, that's very old.
Yeah, and she was only like 40 something when Hamilton died. So she spent most of her life without Hamilton, but she never remarried. She never, it was always, she always talked about Hamilton with reverence. And so one day she's sitting in her backyard, and this girl walks up to her that works for her, with a card that says James Monroe on it, President of the United States, wants to see you. He's out in the front yard. So she goes, "What does he want?" And she's like, "I don't know." So she walks into the living room and lets him inside the house. and he sits. I don't remember if he sits down, but all I know for sure is she does not sit down. She's standing there staring at him, and she's like, "Can I help you?" And he was like, "Hey, so like, listen, it's I was passing through the area, and I just wanted to say, it's been a long time, and we've kind of not had any sort of contact, and I'm not saying that's anyone's fault, but I figured I would put the past behind us, and I just wanted to see how you're doing." And her response was basically, no amount. I mean, if you're here, to apologize for what you did to Hamilton and revealing the Mariah Reynolds scandal,
Yeah, all that time ago.
then great. And I can accept that apology. But if you're not here to apologize, then there is no amount of time that can pass that will cure the wounds of what you did. In which case, sir, go fuck yourself. Now, I'm paraphrasing. She may have said, you blind knave and a witchy thingy, but you get what I'm
I think
saying.
you might have called him a darn rascal.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's really interesting because it reminds me a lot of like there's an echo of the Hamilton Washington spat there where it's like, look, the more important thing is that you respect me for who the person is I am. And it seems like down to it, dude. Hamilton, by most accounts, I guess his own is the best one. He's a really good writer about himself, but they couldn't find the dirt. He wasn't a thief. He was honest about the things that he did do. The crimes he did commit. I get like the philandering and whatnot.
Right.
Tried not to shoot a guy. What more do you want? He like fought in the war. He like did everything you're supposed to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and like I said, he's a flawed person and definitely a bit aristocratic, and that's why I think that he always was getting charged with the idea that he wanted to instill a British monarch in exchange for like land and that kind of thing. And Hamilton would always be like, there is literally no proof of that. But it's because of that kind of air of aristocracy that he would give off that caused such a rift. And so what's interesting about him is that his best quality was his writing and his mind. And that's what turned a lot of people off about him.
Polarizing, right? Like that kind
Right.
of to know you're that impactful with the things you can say and do. And he was, if nothing.
Well, that concludes our 3-part series on Alexander Hamilton.
Finally.
Confetti, pop, sizzle, champagne.
So now I have to find out if other people exist that I can do episodes on.
Nope,
but
there's like 4 people ever.
Yeah. Maybe
There's
Aaron
more than
Burr is
4.
one. I know that. Who was the other 3? I don't remember.
Tune in for the next episode where over 100,000 other people die.
What? Chimney Christmas. All right. Well, that concludes our episode and our series on Alexander Hamilton. You can follow me on Twitter at Jesus Christ at that one loud guy.
Not too long. Hey, see if it's taken. Hold on. Nah, it's taken.
I bet it's open.
Nah, it's just a picture of Lin-Manuel Miranda.
You can follow me at that one loud guy. You can follow Matt at Matchroll20. You can follow Molly at Malswald. I finally got this shit down.
Yep, kind of crushing it.
And you can follow Vinny at The Real Ted Cruz. I do want to say, due to some technical difficulties, the thing I was hyping up will not be having been released by now. But we're working on it, and we're working on a few other new things that I'm really excited about being able to share with you guys. So, with all of that said, don't forget
to like and subscribe. It's me, Molly. It's definitely not Vinny doing a Molly voice.
That is exactly something Molly would say, and that's how I know it's her. Like and subscribe. We'll see you guys later. Peace. I think we have to do this episode. I want to give you a word of warning. God damn it, that's a fucking line from Hamilton. I want to give you a word of warning. I don't have an outline for this episode. I'm just going to go and hope for the best. Like Alexander Hamilton was born in 1474. I think that's right. I don't have my sheet in front of me. And he was related to the Earl of Donger.
What?
I don't know.
Who was it?
I know some. I know
The
some
Earl
guy.
of excuse me, what?
My man got around the Earl of Donger. Everyone knew him. If you didn't know him, you're lying.
Donger? I barely even know her.
You're in my head.
Pistols at Donger.